time no see. Listen, I'm pleased to say that we can award yet another gong to Sir Sadiq Khan. I promised I wouldn't call him that, because he's now reached yet another milestone of making London's roads more congested than any other city in Europe. Well done, Sadiq, I say.
Well, you and I both drive in London, and it's a disaster. You've only got to talk to our wonderful black cabbies, and they're diminishing in numbers daily. I'm afraid I think we're down to something like 15,000 from 20-odd thousand.
Yeah. Because
it's so difficult to make a living driving around London.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I talk to London cabbies, I mean, they do less and less work, and they say that many of them are just kind of semi-retired because it's just not worth their while to come in every single day and sit in traffic making hardly any money.
Yeah, and that's what they do. I mean, it's bad for businesses. It's also very bad for blue light services.
Yes.
Because they just can't get through. And it's all these wretched cycle lanes everywhere, the LTNs, low traffic neighbourhoods. I mean, during the mayoralty, I always mentioned Park Lane, to put those cycle lanes in Park Lane when there's a perfectly good cycle lane in the park. It was just virtue signalling from our wretched, awful mayor. He just wants to bring everything to a gridlock, so we're all forced not to use cars.
Right.
But not everybody can use public transport, and some of us don't want to.
No. And also an awful lot of the public transport now isn't really fit for purpose. A lot of it is a lot older than it used to be, you know. Some of the tube lines now are sort of not fit for purpose anymore. They're crowded, they're overcrowded. You know, they've got technological problems because, you know, they haven't worked as well as they could work for probably a good 5 or 10 years.
Well, there's that. There's also the safety aspect. If you're going out at night, you don't want to be walking around London's roads because so many of us do not feel safe.
Well, that's another thing that he's created, hasn't he? He's created London as a much more dangerous city. I mean, the Labour Party talk all the time about safeguarding women and girls. Well, try telling that to women and girls that live in London.
Well, exactly so. He's not putting any particular effort into that. I mean, obviously, you know, crime is my big thing, and I'm absolutely appalled by some of the measures and the lack of attention to crime from Sadiq Khan. He should put his hands in his pockets and put more money into the Metropolitan Police. Yeah.
Totally. And there's 1,000 mobile phone thefts every single week now. I was a victim of it back in, I think it was October of last year. And we've got, let me show you this that we picked up from the weekend. This is a raid on an Apple store in Brent Cross Shopping Centre, where basically a bunch of young kids, 14 to 18-year-olds, I mean, young men, I suppose, basically terrorise one security guard. They run in, all the people in the shop run out because they're so frightened. There's no police in sight, there's nobody. Then they run out with a load of equipment, a load of phones that they've just literally stolen, and they run off into the rest of the shopping centre. Luckily, I think some of them have been arrested, but not all of them. But, you know, people are being terrorised when they're going shopping, for heaven's sake.
Well, yes. Can you imagine if you were, I mean, I know it well because I don't live that far from Brent Cross. Can you imagine if you were in there with a couple of young children? You know, just browsing around, you'd be terrified. And you could see at the end of the clip that the security guard is coming out. But I mean, in fairness, what can one security guard do against a whole mob that run in like this?
Well, that's it. I mean, you see he stops one of them from going in, but the rest of them just pile in behind him. You know, there's nothing you can do.
That's right. And the poor staff in there, who are very, very helpful and very good. And they're so vigilant, the staff. They're watching those tables the whole time, but of course it's lawless London thanks to Sadiq Khan. Yeah,
it really does feel like that. And I mean, you and I have been talking about this for a long time, many years, but it does feel to me, and I don't like to say this because I love London, it's our capital city, it's a great place for so many reasons, but it feels like it's much more lawless now than it's ever been.
Yes, it does. Because people seem to be emboldened by the fact that they shoplift, or thieve, I'd rather call it. They can do things like we're watching on screen now and get away with it. And really, they need to be taught a lesson. They really do.
They really do. And I guess that a lot of that will sit not just with Sadiq Khan, but also with the Home Office, the Justice Ministers as well. Let me ask you this question, though, because obviously last few days we've been talking an awful lot about grooming gangs and some of the terrible things that happen in places like Telford and Rochdale and Oldham and Rotherham. You know, people have said to me quite frequently over the last few days, how is it that there's none of this kind of activity going on in London, because, you know, we've got plenty of, you know, ethnic areas of this of this city which might, you know, potentially have those kinds of problems, but we don't hear about them.
Yes, I remember it was during COVID. David Curtin, an Assembly member, actually asked Sadiq Khan whether we had any.
Yeah.
And his response was something along the line is, "Are you asking me because of the colour of my skin?" I mean, the trouble is, and this has gone on for years, politicians are scared in a way of being called racist. Now, the Labour lot for years have thought, right, we'll get rid of that person, we'll call them racist.
Yeah.
They did it to me during the mayoral campaign. Hope Not Hate put out hundreds of thousands of leaflets with racist written across my face. And because that is so damaging to politicians, and I suspect that's played a part here, along with police. They don't want to be called racist. And I'm afraid this is a situation that has now come to a head, and I hope to God that we start dealing with this.
Yeah.
These gangs, which are mainly Pakistani men, prying on these poor white, very young people, it's got to be looked into. And quite frankly, don't tell me, Mike, that it's not happening in London, because I'm afraid, I fear that it is.
Well, if it is and it's covered up, then that's even more disgraceful. And let's hope that whatever Elon Musk does, by sort of rattling the wasp's nest and shaking the hornet's nest to do whatever he's doing, that some more of this stuff will come out, and the people who will be held responsible are not just the perpetrators, but the people who covered it up, because those are the people that we need to go after.
Yes, they are, and
Absolutely.
I hope we do.
Yeah, absolutely right. Susan, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Susan Hall, London Assembly member, former Conservative London mayoral candidate, and as she said, somebody who was very much a victim of left-wing propaganda. They call you a racist, they hope you go away. They call you a racist, they hope you get cancelled. They call you a rapist, they hope that the rape accusations disappear.